The Whispering Stacks. There's a library in the heart of Black Vale that most townsfolk have forgotten. Tucked behind a thicket of evergreens and choked ivy, the Thornhill Public Library was once a grand institution before time and tragedy sealed its fate. The building, red brick and brooding, had been closed since 1974 after a mysterious fire gutted the west wing. No one had died in the fire, or so they claimed, but locals whispered otherwise. Amelia Grange didn't believe in ghost stories. A grad student in Gothic literature, she arrived in Black Vale chasing the fabled Rook manuscript, a lost text supposedly hidden within Thornhill's archives. After months of unanswered emails and stonewalled attempts at accessing the property, Amelia was finally granted permission by the town's Antiquities Board to conduct a private investigation. The key was cold and heavy in her hand, its teeth jagged like fangs. She stood at the library's arched entrance, the wooden doors towering over her like slumbering giants. Moss grew between the bricks, and the windows wore veils of grime. Yet something about the place beckoned her. Inside, dust reigned like an ancient ruler. Light filtered through the stained glass windows in fractured patterns, casting the reading tables in murky reds and golds. The air was thick with the scent of mold, leather, and something less definable, like forgotten breath. Her boots echoed against the marble as she crossed into the main reading hall. Rows of shelves stood like soldiers, their spines cracked, whispering of the years they'd endured. Amelia unpacked her satchel, placing a small flashlight and her notebook on the central desk. As she began cataloging the shelves, she noticed something odd. The books near the center of the room were newer, far newer than 1974. One had a library tag dated 1981. She blinked. That wasn't possible. Amelia checked another, 1985, a third, 1992. She paused, a chill crawling down her spine. There were no records of the library reopening. No staff had been registered since the fire. So how were the books newer than the building's closure? Then came the first whisper. It was faint, barely audible, a rustling that seemed to come from the far end of the hall. Amelia turned. "Hello?" she called out, voice cracking. No answer. She stepped toward the noise, flashlight in hand, its beam slicing through the gloom. The far shelves curved into a narrow corridor known as the Stacks, a claustrophobic labyrinth of bookcases designed for archives and special collections. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature dropped. The whispers returned, closer now, though still indistinct. It wasn't language. Not exactly. It sounded like a chorus of breathless voices, mouthing fragments of sentences, some in English, others in Latin, and still others that clawed at her mind with syllables she could not place. A soft thud sounded behind her. She spun around. A book had fallen from the top shelf, lying open at her feet. It was the Rook manuscript. Emilia's breath caught. She dropped to her knees, trembling fingers reaching for the cover. The pages were yellowed, the ink blurred in places, but the title was unmistakable. Of Whispers and Warnings, a treatise on lingering spirits by Revermon H. Rook. As she flipped through the pages, she realized this was no mere academic volume. The margins were riddled with annotations, warnings, prayers, and what appeared to be personal confessions. Several pages were missing, violently torn out. Then she noticed the last line written in pencil. "The library speaks when no one listens." A loud crash jolted her. She turned back toward the corridor, but it had changed. The entrance was no longer there. The stacks had shifted. Impossible. She reached out and tried to retrace her steps, but every turn led her deeper into the labyrinth. The books became older, more brittle, their titles indecipherable. Dust hung in the air like fog, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. Then she saw her. A figure, pale and thin, standing between two shelves. A librarian, or what was left of one. The woman wore a tattered cardigan, her hair coiled in a style that belonged to another era. Her eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to drink in the dim light. Her mouth moved in slow, jerking motions, but the sound that came out was not her own. It was dozens of voices spilling from one throat. "Return what was taken," the ghostly figure moaned. Emilia backed away. I didn't take anything," she stammered. The apparition raised an arm, pointing directly at the Rook manuscript still clutched in Emilia's hands. "Return it, or stay." With that, the shelves behind the ghost creaked and groaned, splitting apart to reveal a hidden alcove. Inside was a pedestal, marble, cracked, and atop it a mold-ridden journal, missing several pages. Emilia approached, pulse thundering in her ears. She gently placed the Rook manuscript on the pedestal. For a moment, silence. Then the whispers ceased. The shelves behind her groaned again, shifting back to their original positions, revealing the corridor that led to the main hall. She turned, but the librarian was gone. Back at the central desk, Emilia packed quickly. She dared not look back, dared not think about the things she had heard, or the shadow that trailed her as she exited the building. As she locked the doors behind her and stepped into the foggy dusk, the stained glass windows flickered with an amber glow, just for a moment, like eyes blinking shut. Weeks later, Amelia submitted her thesis, including notes about the Rook manuscript and the inexplicable experience at Thornhill. But no one could verify the manuscript's existence. When officials returned to the library to investigate, they found nothing but ash and collapsed shelving where the manuscript had supposedly been. And Emilia? She never went back. But sometimes when she dreams, she sees the stacks, endless and dark, calling her name with 1,000 borrowed voices.